This episode of the Sara Carter podcast is brought to you by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. On 9/11, we vowed to never forget. Help America keep that promise. Donate $11 a month to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org.
We've got a lot for you today on the show here at the Sara Carter Show. We've got Jerry Torres back. I don't know if you all remember him, but he is the former CEO of the multi-million-dollar Defense Contracting Corporation, Advanced Enterprise Solutions. He is now working to expose the truth all across the globe. This is a man who served our military with distinction and who has worked overseas, both in Iraq, Afghanistan, all parts of Africa, all parts of Central America. Now he's back from a trip in El Salvador, and he has a huge story to share with us. And you're going to get insider information into what's happening on the ground as these caravans move their way up to the United States. So you don't want to miss this Border Follow with Jerry Torres. Also, I'm going to be talking to you about two very important stories to me. One is, of course, China. And I'm talking about the fact that we are now at a critical juncture with the Chinese government. This is something that we're not paying enough attention to. And it is, are we capable of keeping up with China, both technologically, and I'm talking not just with our, the space race and everything that's happening in space with Chinese technology, but here on the ground, Cyber Command, and the fact that we had somebody, a very high level person in the Defense Department, just leave, basically walk away from his role at Cyber Command because he says it's like kindergarten compared to China. And we'll go into details of that story. This has to do with our cybersecurity and everything else that we're dealing with right now as far as our national security and what's at play there. So you do not want to miss this show. Remember, you could subscribe and get all the links to all of my social media at saracarter.com. That's saracarter.com. That's where you'll get all the links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything else you need. And while you are there, please sign up for our email list so that you do not get shadow banned. Remember, you could go to saracarter.com. That is saracarter.com. You sign up for the email list. You will not be shadow banned, folks. That's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to be able to stay in communication with you. Now is a critical time to be vigilant in the defense of our freedom. And there's no better way to do it than with my favorite sponsor, the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC. Look, AMAC believes in fighting the good fight against reckless government spending and the ever-expanding scope of the federal government, helping small businesses, securing our borders, supporting our military, kneeling before God. If you join AMAC, you're taking the first steps, listen to this, to saving the America you love, and I know you want to save her. AMAC offers an alternative to just about every benefit that AARP offers, but without the liberal agenda, folks. I stand with AMAC, and I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join today at amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter. The benefits of membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Carter. So where do I want to start here? I mean, I'm going to just start off the top. We are now facing a very formidable enemy. Yes, an enemy. And we have been for quite some time. And it's kind of like one of those weird, it's not a frenemy. It's actually a real enemy. But it's not an obvious war, right? Remember, it was kind of like the Soviet Union and the Cold War with the United States. It's a Cold War with China. This, I believe. We've seen what happened with the Wuhan laboratories, with the leak of the COVID-19 virus and what it's done to our planet. And I'm still not even sure we don't even know the details of how that exactly happened. Remember, at the time that the COVID virus began to spread, at that point in time, that was a critical juncture for China as well. People were uprising in Hong Kong. People on the mainland of China, even in Beijing, they were having problems with their students. I do not trust the Chinese Communist Party. I do believe that the Chinese see maybe 10 to 20 steps ahead of us. They have been very adamant about the fact that they see China, the future of China's role in the world, as being the global superpower. The United States, in China's eyes, will not play that role in the distant future. They will not need us. And I'm going to explain why. They're spreading all across the globe, both in Africa and Central America. I've talked about this before. China's influence in South Asia as well. And South Asia makes a lot more sense if you say, well, Pakistan, because they're in that part of the world. But if you look at what's happening in Central America and you look at the fact that the Chinese government has paid so much attention to Central America, they've reached out with massive olive branches of economic aid to Central America. Hey, let us build a highway for you. Let us build a road. Let us put in your 5G system. And now in the United States, we're starting to come to the realization that while we have been fiddling around with all kinds of crazy stuff in our government, like whether or not we're going to be equitable and putting CRT in our schools and all of this crazy nonsense that makes no sense at all, that just drives us backwards instead of forwards, which divides our nation in half and divides our people, divides parents from students and people from each other. The Chinese have been moving at like top speed, like a bullet train in Japan, far exceeding us technologically and educate with education. We are falling so far behind. Right now, a Pentagon official, this is a top story, Business Insider magazine has right now, a top Pentagon official said he resigned because U.S. cybersecurity is no match for China. He basically calls it kindergarten level. That's what he's saying. Nicholas Chilan, he served as the U.S. Air Force's software chief and worked on Pentagon security. He quit in September, and he told the Financial Times last week that the U.S. was far behind China on AI, artificial intelligence. This is the truth. I know that one of the biggest issues in our intelligence community right now is our cybersecurity and our artificial intelligence. You know, it sounds like we're talking about something so futuristic, because we are. We are now at that point in time in history where we are developing at such a rapid speed our technology. I don't even think we can keep up with it. But we certainly don't want our enemies or nation states that have maybe nefarious attitudes towards our own country and don't want to see us succeed. We don't want them having that kind of technology in their hands and being able to utilize that against us in the future. This scares me. Nicholas Chilan says, basically, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, it's Chaillan, Chilan, I believe. He says, we have no competing, fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years. And I'm guessing he came out and he resigned and he did this because he was just sick and tired of what's going on in the government and the failure of our government to take care of the national security of our nation. Not only are we failing at the border, we are failing on every single level. We are failing our children. We are failing our communities. We have a president in office who really does not have the common sense or the administration, the people, the officials in place to do what is necessary to bring our nation up to speed against these enemy states. Let me read this a little bit to you. A senior cybersecurity official at the Pentagon said that he quit because he thought it was impossible for the U.S. to compete with China on AI, artificial intelligence. And by the way, the Russians are moving at hyperspeed on AI right now. And I know this from speaking to intelligence officials that are working on this very problem. Nicholas Chilan joined the U.S. Air Force as its first chief software officer in August 2018. He worked to equip it and the Pentagon with the most secure and advanced software available. Let me tell you this, when I started at the Washington Times, and gosh, I don't even remember if that was 2007 right now, probably 2006 or 7, at the Washington Times, I remember going to the Pentagon, and at that point in time, I talked to the top Air Force official on cybersecurity at the Pentagon. And during that time, he revealed to me, it was a story that was already public, about a Chinese student that was attending like the University of Virginia and had basically hacked into the Pentagon 7 layers deep. The Pentagon at that point in time was trying to figure out, and they did it through the folks at PayPal and others, to create a system to try to stop the Chinese from hacking in. So they ended up finding out about this and how deep this Chinese student hacked into the Pentagon when the Chinese actually published a story in Beijing in their main paper written by the Chinese student who was actually part of the Chinese military's cyber officers and cyber unit. Think about this. A cyber unit intelligence operative from China in 2007 was already, or maybe even prior to that, already hacking into our Pentagon command underneath our noses, living in Virginia, and he laughed at us. He went back to Beijing, wrote a column slamming the United States for its failure and its inability to catch him. And now, fast forward 2021, we've got this guy, Nicholas Chilan, who is basically with the U.S. Air Force, top guy, says, I'm quitting because nobody's listening to me and the Chinese are way ahead of us. He quit on September 2nd. In his departing LinkedIn post, he cited the Pentagon's reluctance to make cybersecurity and AI a priority as a reason for his resignation. Think about that. Speaking to the Financial Times in his first interview since leaving, Chilan said China was far ahead of the U.S. We have no competing fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years. Right now, it's already a done deal. It's already over, in my opinion. That's pretty scary. And what also makes that really frightening, guys, is that, I hear a lot of people out there, why do we need Space Command? We got to be spending more money here and doing this and doing that. Space Command is not about finding UFOs, guys. It's not just about going to Mars. It's not just, well, hopefully it would be about stopping like a comet or an asteroid or something like those movies, I mean, I hope so. I hope we can get to that point. But it's about owning space. And the Chinese own space. They do. We own space. Everybody's competing for space here. Everybody wants a piece of that space. And believe me, China is fighting hard to control it. And there are some really classified issues when it comes to space and owning space and our satellite systems and, how we operate and our internet and the way the world is run. It's all about space. Geospatial, right? Our weather, our ability to watch television, our ability to move planes from point A to point B now, our computers, our missiles, everything about our life kind of connects to space. And that's why these generals and people at Space Command are adamant that if we don't pay attention, if we don't invest our money in AI and in cybersecurity and our satellites, we could be facing such a threat. We think the world is just going to be like this forever. It's not. We think our nation is just going to exist like this. You think because you exist like this right now, nothing can ever change? No, it can at the drop of a hat. I don't mean to be scary. I don't mean to be an alarmist, but look at what happened with COVID-19. One minute we were all shopping, going to the grocery store, going to school, and the next minute our lives were turned upside down. Our economies were turned upside down. Everything was turned upside down. Imagine for 1 second. Imagine for 1 second all of our satellite systems go out. What's going to happen then? Imagine for 1 second an enemy state chooses to disable us. This is a very real serious threat. And I'm telling you, this is something that's being debated right now at the highest levels of our intelligence community, whether that's a CIA, whether that's the other 16 in, U.S. Intelligence agencies that are looking into all of this. Let me read you this story. This one I think is really important. It's before we get to the border, and we'll get right into the interview with Jerry Torres. But U.S. generals were planning for a space war, and they say it's all but inevitable, and that's with China. A ship in the Pacific Ocean carrying a high-powered laser takes aim at a U.S. spy satellite, blinding its sensors and denying the United States critical eyes in the skies. This is one scenario that military officials and civilian leaders fear could lead to the escalation of a wider conflict as rival nations like China and Russia step up development and the deployments of anti-satellite weapons. If a satellite came under attack, depending on the circumstances, the appropriate measures can be taken, said Lieutenant General John Shaw, Deputy Commander of U.S. Space Command. The space battlefield is not science fiction, and anti-satellite weapons are going to be a reality in the future of armed conflicts, Shaw said at the 36th Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. Think about that. Think about it. Because we can imagine the world just the way it is right now, or we can prepare and protect ourselves from something really bad like that ever happening. And that's why things like this are important. And that's why it's important to pay attention to what's going on in the world and to what's happening. By the way, even if you don't live at the border, why the border should be important to you. Why the border should be important to you. I don't know if you saw this, but there were 9 GOP governors at the border, and I was with them. It was led by Governor Greg Abbott. It was amazing. It was an amazing trip for all of them to see what was going on. And it was also a time of real reflection for a lot of the governors from out of state. There were people from Ohio that came along with Governor DeWine, from Ohio. And Governor DeWine has a huge issue. It's addiction and fentanyl in his state. That's all coming through the U.S.-Mexico border. And this southern border is wide open. And that fentanyl, by the way, just to throw a little, wrench in there, a lot of that fentanyl is still coming from China, you guys. I like to call it irregular warfare. I bring it up all the time. That's why this is so important. We have to pay attention to what's happening to our children in their schools, what's happening on our border. We can't be blinded by these, wild, issues that are, that by the way, that the president is trying to push out there. Things that are not important. Things that are not important. What is important is our communities. What is important is what's happening right now in front of us every single day. And we can't buy the disinformation that the White House is pushing out there, or we can't be worried about whether or not we're all being equitable or not. That's like ridiculous. That's like a ruse. Let me read you some of what these governors said, and I think it's important. We were out in Mission, Texas. The area has been overwhelmed by drug cartels, human traffickers, and tens of thousands. Right this year is going to be roughly around 2 million people that they think are going to be coming in through the border illegally. And I want you to kind of grasp that number. That is huge. 2 million. The Oklahoma governor, Kevin Stitt, he was there. This was one of the things that he said. He said, I do not believe in sanctuary cities. We have to be a state of laws. And as governor, I will enforce these laws. I will enforce the immigration laws. We will not have sanctuary cities. That's another big issue that they're fighting. But what's Oklahoma fighting against? Oklahoma's fighting against drug addiction. You have Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. I did a one-on-one interview with him. And Ducey's like, look, this is a serious national security issue. This is probably one of the biggest crises facing our nation right now, is this border crisis. It's something that if we don't pay attention to it now, we're going to lose a generation of kids to narcotics. We're going to lose the security of our nation. The only job that the president has is to secure those borders. Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia was there. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, I had a chance to talk to her. She was amazing. She actually went out afterwards on a boat with Texas deputies, with the DPS, Department of Public Safety, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She was saying, Iowa is the border. She had children in her community that had been trafficked. She's trying to figure out, what is going on here? Why is the United States government assisting in the trafficking of human beings? Why people aren't being prosecuted? I don't know. She didn't know. Here's what she said. She said, my first responsibility is to the health and safety of Iowans and the humanitarian crisis at our nation's southern border. And it's affecting all 50 states. the rise in drugs, human trafficking, and violent crime has become unsustainable. Iowa has no choice but to act. The basic message that these governors were sending to the White House is if you're not going to do something about this, we are going to do something about this, Mr. President. We are going to do something about this. And that's why I have Jerry Torres on the show today, because he's somebody who said, you know what, if the government is not going to tell us the truth, I am going to tell you the truth. I am going to get out there and I am going to find out what is happening. But before I get to Jerry Torres, I want to talk to you about MyPillow and Mike Lindell, who's a great friend of mine. Folks, you can get great discounts on all MyPillow products if you go to mypillow.com right now, and then you click on the radio listeners specials. Go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listeners specials. Get deep discounts on MyPillow mattress toppers, towels, and so much more. They've got slippers, you know I've got those, dog beds, I've got 3 of those, and even high quality weight blankets. Those are so amazing and they keep you so warm. They're just great. You guys aren't going to regret them. For example, Mike is offering a buy one, get one free offer on his Giza Dream Sheets. They are so soft and I love them just as much as every other MyPillow product. Remember, go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener specials for the buy one, get one free offer on the Giza Dream Sheets. Enter promo code Carter, that's CARTER, or call 1-800-685-7221 for great MyPillow specials. That's 1-800-685-7221. Be sure to use the promo code Carter at checkout. Jerry, I am so grateful that you're back on the Sara Carter Show. You got to tell me about this trip. I'm a little bit in awe of how much information you were able to get, and I teased it at the top of the show, but particularly from the cartels. So if you could fill us in on what drove you to go to El Salvador, I would really appreciate that.
I was reading the pillars of why the Biden administration thinks that we should either allow people or give money to the country so they don't come here illegally. And one of those things is, that MS-13 is going after him. The militaries are going after the people. The police are going after the people. And nothing could be further than the truth. I met with our special operations forces, and you're familiar with the SOF, obviously, and a 7th Special Forces Group, and they have been training the El Salvadoran special operations folks. And I met with the deputy director of their special ops folks there, and they said there's no MS-13 here. They might be pockets of them here and there in small neighborhoods, but they pretty much wiped them out. So it's not MS-13 causing people to come into our country illegally.
Jerry, and I want you to explain, because a lot of our listeners don't really have a grasp of like 7th Group, what our special operations forces do, how they train basically indigenous people or the people from the nation to kind of defend themselves. Can you go over that a little bit? Sure.
Well, the 7th Special, the world is divided up into regions, and our special operations forces have different regions that they're responsible for. In South America, it happens to be the 7th Special Forces Group, which was also Vietnam. All of them have gone to Vietnam. They've been to Afghanistan. They've been to Iraq, etc.
Right.
But that's their area of operations, primary. And so they've been down there doing what's called foreign internal defense missions, which means let's help the local governments protect themselves against insurgencies. And MS-13 is kind of considered, a potential insurgency because they were so strong at one point. But really not that strong in El Salvador. So they were sending special forces teams into El Salvador to train their special operations forces. And not many people know this, but we also train their police, because a lot of militaries in South America, their special forces are part of their police units, not part of their military. So, and in this case, they are police. So I met with the deputy director, and he said, hey, 7th Group has been here for years. There is no MS-13 threat in El Salvador. They're up in California and the United States.
And that's exactly what a lot of people don't understand. That's where they really took root. MS-13 was in the Los Angeles area. Some of them did get sent back when they were deported back to El Salvador. And we've seen the pictures of the Salvadorian prisons and such. But part of the misinformation is the fact that, El Salvador is just overrun with MS-13, and that people are fleeing all of these various forms of corruption before coming to the United States. And I had a Border Patrol agent say this to me once, and I thought it was brilliant. They said, well, what about the kids that live in Chicago? What about the kids that live in Baltimore, Detroit? Where do they go? Where do our kids go that are in the middle of, a war zone of cartels and gangs?
Right.
And there is that misconception that El Salvador is just completely a failed state. It's really not, right? I mean,
That's
there's
correct.
a lot. Describe your experience there.
Well, the first thing, for a failed state of 6.4 million people, they have 1 million expats with second homes and first homes there. So it's not that dangerous. The second thing is that, which gets back to one of the pillars of Biden and Harris's, why we are allowing the people to come into our country, is that their military and their police forces are going after their people, that they are torturing, detaining, killing, mass graves, a whole bit. Their military, the people on the street, I spoke to people on the street, I went to protests, I went to the borders, I spoke to their Congress people, I spoke to the head of their legislator.
And this is all for your documentary, right, Jerry? Because you're
Correct.
putting together a whole series exposing what's really going on. And I just want everybody out there to understand what Jerry's doing here. He is really getting to the truth. He's not just picking up a piece of paper and believing exactly what the administration's saying. Your expertise is to get to the truth, and that means getting to the country where it's happening.
So, and meeting with all those people, and I also met with drug cartels. I met with human trafficking cartels. I met with 4 of them, the heads of them. But the people on the street, the police are just so professional. The people love the police. They love the military because they have such a stable, relatively safe country. I mean, if you go to St. Louis and you go to Chicago and you go to Memphis and you go to some of these other cities, they are less stable and much more violent than El Salvador's worst areas. The other thing is, so they don't have things, the other pillar is that they don't have access to social or, medical care, clinics, doctors, et cetera, et cetera. I went to some of the hospitals and they are as clean can be. I've been to hospitals in New York, for example, in Queens, in Jackson Heights, for example. Mm-hmm. And the hospitals overall, not all of them, but overall, the hospitals in El Salvador are better than the ones I saw in Queens and Flushing, Queens, and Jackson Heights, Queens.
Well, why do you think there's this misconception? Is it just the economy? Are people coming here because, of course, we do know that the economy in El Salvador is not where it should be. There's not the jobs, the people don't have the money, or the resources necessarily, but it's not necessarily because of what the administration is saying, correct?
That's correct. They are coming here because the cartels, and I met with 4 of them. I have one on video. The others would not go on video with me. But they say the primary reason that the people are going to the United States is economic, and that's it. They're not in fear of their country. They're not in fear of the police. They're not in fear of MS-13. They just want a better life. And and the thing is if you take a look at what they're claiming, they're claiming asylum. Well, asylum is not for economic reasons. Correct. Asylum is for, hey, my company or my country is, targeting me. This is a political issue, and they're targeting people like me, and they're not doing that. It's very, very civilized society.
And they're basically training. In a lot of, and this is something, for me, traveling in Central America and being on the border, covering this issue, the cartels and the human traffickers, let me see if this is what they've told you. They're basically rehearsing with a lot of the people, the migrants that are coming across. This is what you need to say when you get across. This is what you need to ask for, or you won't be able to stay. So it's kind of like a dress rehearsal of sorts, before they come here. They are taught what are our loopholes and what do you need to say.
Oh, absolutely. You're exactly right on that. The drug cartels say that, we have a person that trains, coaches, and mentors them, from the time they pick them up in El Salvador, and then they'll pick up more when they cross the border with Guatemala and pick up, more when they go to Mexico. So by the time they get to our border, they've got 70 to 100 people. And along the way, they're teaching, training, coaching, mentoring on what to say, how to present themselves to our ICE or Border Patrol folks. So yeah. And the other thing is that it's door-to-door service. And the guy that's on tape with me, and I hope you get a chance to see it.
Oh, I can't wait.
He prides himself on, I give the best service. I get him from, San Salvador all the way to Silver Spring, Maryland.
How much does he charge? How much does he charge for that?
$8,000 for an adult, $11,000 for a minor.
Wow. So 11,000 for a minor. Now, we know that if you bring in the minors, your chances of staying, especially if they're 7 and under, are great. I mean, they're not going to send you back home if you got a kid under 7. I just reported on Sean Hannity's show, the most recent 7-year-old abandoned at El Centro, California border, basically left all alone in a very dangerous area where there's rushing water. What are they saying about these kids? Did you have a chance to talk to them about our kids being rented out, or, our children being used to bring people in and then sent back to San Salvador or sent back to Mexico to bring more in? Did they say anything about the kids?
Well, there are 2 points about the kids. Yes, kids are used to get into the country, and it seems to be a little bit flawed because when they leave somebody, they don't have a parent with them. But that kid could also be a distraction because they're moving drugs, to a place adjacent to where the kid is. So it might draw some folks. But here's something that's interesting, and it's going to sound a little bit off the track. But if you think about a country that's, quote unquote poor, which it's not poor, these people have to come up with 50% of their $8,000, right, to get to the place. And then when they arrive in Silver Spring, Maryland, or Virginia. And by the way, I bring those 2 places up because I actually went to a safe house in Virginia where they arrive. But when they leave, they have to pay half of it. Okay. Now, here's what they can do. They can provide them with their sister, young cousin, young friend as the down payment. And then those people end up in the sex trade, primarily in California. That's one point to this.
So they're moving the children, and these are underage children for the most part, or are they just okay? And they run a ring, because I know there was a ring in the West Coast that was moving children around. Are they part of a ring like that where they're moving children up and down on the West Coast and things of that nature to sell them?
Yeah. So the people who would not go on camera were more. They explained it. They didn't think I'd. They weren't worried about talking because they're talking and not being videotaped. But the guy that I actually videotaped denied doing that. But the people who hooked me up with them said, they move kids in that way, and they'll take a down payment for movement with a child. Now, I met with an individual whose friend had a daughter that was in that situation, and somebody put her onto a cartel person, and the cartel person took her, and they took her to Mexico, where she was there for 4 months, in the sex trade, and she was a young, 12-year-old girl.
So basically, this is something that I say it over and over again, Jerry. I try to pound this into people's heads that if the government, if you care about these people, if you care about the children, if you care about what is happening, you'll want this to stop. You'll want the administration to stop this. Instead, Border Patrol agents, DPS, DEA, FBI guys, CIA, whoever I've been talking to said, look, we've become a part of the sex trafficking ring. Would you say that? Would you say that by us just allowing this to happen, that we have become complicit?
Yes.
Not us, but the government,
Yeah, absolutely. Congress, one thing is that Congress has not designated cartels as being terrorist organizations. When they do that, then there's a military option there. And I think that's, Congress is afraid of the military option. So yes, we are complicit. And the interesting thing is that, when you hear about these killings, in the United States, and they don't have a motive for the killing, a lot of it, and this is part of my, part of the interview that I had that was taped, is that if they get to their destination, the trafficker moves the illegal immigrant to a place here in Virginia, then, and they don't get paid the other half, they're going to go after the family members. And that's, if you take a look at some of these quote unquote MS-13 hits that have been happening here on the East Coast, a lot of them are related to the families are not paying their 50% of the bill for trafficking the person from El Salvador, Guatemala, or Mexico to here.
That's a fascinating point, because that's something that we don't even hear enough from our, the authorities, because they honestly, a lot of our undercover police officers don't come forward to talk about it because they're protecting their own identity. And, they're working inside some of these really dangerous gangs and have actual people that are informants. So your ability to kind of traverse this really dark place in our country and in our world is, to me, it's incredible, because I think the only way to understand something is to get to the truth of the matter. You can't get to the truth unless you're there. It was like being in Afghanistan, right? Somebody could talk to you all day long about Afghanistan, but until you're actually there, it's a completely different story. It's a completely different place.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, with those killings, what struck you as the most, I guess, surprising element of what these cartel members can do once they're in the US? Because their power and their ability in the communities is something that I wouldn't even think possible in this time frame, right? But they control communities inside the United States. This isn't just about El Salvador. Look, if the excuse is they're getting shook down in El Salvador, right? That they're afraid of the gangs, they're afraid of that. That's why we're getting them here. Well, they come here, and that's what I'm hearing from the people I know too. They're controlling the Section 8 housing developments. They're soliciting for sex. They're taking money. They're extortion going on here in the United States.
Yes.
So that's the irony of it all. They're leaving there to come here, and they're getting extorted here by MS-13.
Yeah, that you asked me what surprised me. I did not realize that cartels just don't live in El Salvador or Mexico or Guatemala or Honduras. They live right here in the United States. And I didn't put that together until I actually, spoke to the very last guy I spoke to, which was, a human trafficking head person. His area of operations in the United States is Florida and the Washington, D.C. area. And it just so happens I was able to go into one of their safe houses in Woodbridge, Virginia, run by a mother and a daughter. And I walked into the living room, and there were about 15 people there. There was an upstairs, and I don't know if there was a basement. I didn't take the time to actually look. But
wait, why do you think he trusted you? Why do you think because I've had these experiences before where people have actually just said, I want to let you in. Why do you think they're doing that?
Like I said, I spoke to four. He was the fourth. And I just had my team going and knocking on doors and convincing them. I let them set the venue. So I was actually putting my life in, kind of in danger as well. But ultimately, this one guy did speak. And the minute it was over, he ran. He just took off,
wow.
With this, So, he was worried that the police were involved, and he's, and the whole
He got
thing,
nervous. But it's almost like they want to tell their story, right? It's almost like they want to it's like a game for them in some ways.
This guy was a pure businessman. His background was he was a cattleman. He sold cattle. Now he sells human beings, in the same way. And, he's got marketers. His marketers use Facebook and TikTok and other social media, and they go out into the communities and talk to people. He has his directors, his people, his coyotes that move them from, border to border to border, all the way to the United States, training and coaching and mentoring, like I just said. And he had, here's the thing that shocked me. He said that, and I hate to even think of this or even say it, but he's got some of our border agents on his payroll, he said.
Look, it isn't surprising. We've seen people taken into custody in the United States, our federal agents. I was told very early on in 2005, I believe, when I started covering this, that the coyotes would have watchers sitting in the mountains, and they would be watching the Border Patrol agents, and they would get it. They would be watching them for intel, much like you would. You understand intelligence, Jerry, more than anybody, right? What are you looking for? You're looking for a guy that's maybe desperate, someone that's flirting, someone that's having an affair, someone that is in a lot of debt. There's all kinds of people that, just like a good intelligence operative would do, the coyotes or or the cartels do the same. How serious do you believe this is? I mean, because we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in drugs and human trafficking. That could buy a lot of people.
I just don't know. I was completely taken aback by that, because I just think the world of our, our law
Right.
enforcement officers on the border. But what you just said is, if there are weaknesses in the family and their behavior, that sort of thing, obviously they can be taken advantage of. So, and that's,
Right.
when people get security clearances, that's the number one thing that keeps them from getting security clearances are those personal vulnerabilities. So,
I mean, we've seen it out here, even in the great state of Texas. There have been moments where they've like caught like a local sheriff, or somebody who's on the payroll, or
sure,
somebody who
yeah,
was involved in a kidnapping or something
right,
because they were deeply in debt, or they were indebted in some way, or they were blackmailed.
right.
But you're right, that does not take away from the majority of the good, very good law enforcement officers, military personnel like you and others who have done the job. I I got to tell you, Jerry, this is probably one of the most interesting and best interviews I've ever had. I don't want to let you go just yet. I want you to tell me, over all of what you did in El Salvador, maybe what struck you beyond what we just talked about, but being over there in El Salvador, I think what what was a revelation for you? Because you've been around a while. You have covered intelligence, you're military, you have been around bad guys before. Basically, I think you're an expert in terrorism as well. But I think what strikes you as the most important aspect of your trip, let's say in El Salvador?
That if we had the wall, we would not have this level of people coming in. And
Why?
consistently, well, because the wall is a barrier, and if they can't, and if if we don't do catch and release and they have to wait in Mexico, that's a barrier. And that's one thing that was clear about among the traffickers, as well as their special operations forces, the deputy director that I spoke to. And I also spoke to the head of their military, their Senate heads of their military and their ministries of justice. And everyone says, hey, if that border wall is up, we're not going. That's number one. Number two, and I think you have experience along these lines, but the president of Guatemala was offered $1.35 billion,
Correct.
and he refused to meet with our vice president and refused to meet with her envoy and preferred to communicate with, our administration via email or text message or something like that. That is the lack of respect that this tiny 6.4 million people country has for our current administration. They had respect for Donald Trump, who took, his approach was businesslike,
Right.
logical, with rationale. And it was rational to build a wall. So, the cartel people, the military people, the police people, the Senate folks that I met with, all unequivocally say the wall will stop people from moving to the United States.
Right. And he also believed, President Trump, and this was his business side, right, of building strong bilateral economic relationships with
Sure.
our partners in the Western Hemisphere that would strengthen both of our nations and not
Exactly.
give one nation more than the other, but be on a basically equal footing as best as
Right.
we could do it. There is that lack of respect in Guatemala. President Yamatei, it's like, we want this relationship to be
Right.
strong, but we don't want to be
Right.
used. Do you think there are people that actually in the government now in the United States, and I'm not asking you to get political, but I'm just asking you from your experience being in Central America, NGOs, organizations that may be more apt to open borders, that they are pushing for an open borders agenda with the United States? That because I can't fathom why the administration would want this to happen.
NGOs, you're probably not going to be able to air what I'm about to say, but I've seen NGOs around the world. I've had a company in 60 countries, and I stay at good hotels when I travel to Jordan or to Uganda or wherever I am. And the thing is the NGOs show up for breakfast at 10, and then they show up for wine at 3. And that's consistent, UN people as well. That's consistent in every country I've been to. So I don't know that they actually do much in the way of work. They have all their vehicles outside and their drivers the whole bit. And, they get all the grant money from our government. So they're not they're not that effective. They don't actually get out there. I'll tell you who does get out there in the weeds are folks from the Peace Corps. They're very dogged and they get out there and they work with the people. And I'm just amazed at their effectiveness.
Right.
But I don't know who benefits from this, except the hope that, you're creating 2 million new voters, for the Democrats. And the thing is what they've also missed out on is the fact that Latin Americans believe in family.
Right.
Latin Americans believe in hard work and earning your keep. They are not, by default, just because you let them come into the border, a Democrat.
Right.
So I think they might have miscalculated that. And when I talk to them, they're hardworking. That I had my company in El Salvador that I sold, as part of my global business, and I met some of my former employees, and they're still working hard. They just believe in hard work, taking care of your family, spending time with your children and your wife and that stuff. They're conservative in nature, in my opinion, in that region.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And I believe that overall, like you're 100% right. There is a huge miscalculation on the part of the Democrats. Oh, on everyone.
Right.
We've seen it across the board in the United States, in other countries, this idea that, okay, if we bring in 2 million, we're going to get these 2 million voters. Well, you may get a few just for a little bit, until they figure out that the Democrats really don't care about them. They're just
Sure.
using them for a vote, and that giving them the tools that they need to build a better life, which is
Right.
what people want to do anyways, no matter where they're from, is the
Mhm.
right way to go. What would your advice be to, and I'm going to bring you back on, Jerry, because I also really am serious when I talk to you about, I want to do something with you. I really want to partner with you. I want to, I don't know. I testified in Ohio. I was, and there was it was kind of a symbolic message sent to Washington, D.C. to basically designate the drug cartels a terrorist organization. And that came from the Ohio State Legislature. But I want to be with you on this. I truly believe, this was the question I was going to ask you. I was thinking about this. Do you think, and this is going to be for another episode, but right now I'm going to let everyone hear, this is the tease to bring Jerry back on. When you think about the fentanyl coming across our border, when you think about the fentanyl penetrating the United States, the extraordinary amount of deaths, over 90,000 in this country from overdose last year, would you consider that irregular warfare on the United States? We have a border that's completely porous. We've got drugs infiltrating. We've got
Sure.
stuff coming from China. Mexican drug
So-
cartels benefiting.
Sure. Yeah, that absolutely. And, that falls under the auspices of a terrorist act because they know the potency of this, of this drug and what it can do to our own American citizens. So they're reaching out to our country. They exist within our country, and they are knowingly giving, our people a potent drug that can end in death, easily accidentally. So, and getting back to you, talking about in Ohio with respect to terrorism, the former drug czar Bill Bennett, during Plan Colombia, he's been pushing, he was pushing the Trump administration. Obviously, they're not there anymore, to designate these cartels as terrorist organizations for the very reasons that you're talking about.
Right. And we didn't see that with the DEA, with the Drug Enforcement Agency. Some people in there fought against that. There's a big internal battle in the bureaucracy who's going to be in control of the drug war, and everybody's territorial. But I think to protect American people and our children, we really have to consider that. And we really have to designate some of these terrorist these drug cartels, terrorist organizations. Last, advice to the American people. I want you to be able to, to our listeners out there, what can they do to maybe push the government in the right direction to shut this border down and to stop this crime, I believe, against our country, failure of national security, and to stop this humanitarian crisis in its tracks?
I have, I'm surprised. I have listened to our politicians on the Democratic side, and I don't think that they're conscious at the level that we would expect somebody in those positions to be. there's nothing that we can say to them. So it's not a battle that we're going to win against the administration. If you actually listen to that woman, Jen Psaki, and what she says, it's amazing that, I mean, she's super smart, but she's got to know that she's not telling the truth sometimes. So when you get to a person that's not going to tell you the truth, the communication is lost.
Right.
My advice is, in 2022, all of us need to get out there. I'm not a voter. I'm one of those guys who, everyone else will fix it, but this time around I am. If I get myself off my couch and get out there and vote, I would ask everybody else to, because you're voting for, the health, the sovereignty of our nation, the health of our people, the health of our children, the future generations, and taking care of us Americans first, and not taking care of, people who are coming in here illegally first. That's
right.
And so I would say, hunker down, learn as much as you can, and let's pick our battle. And our next battle is the congressional races that are going to go on in 2022.
100%. Hunker down. Gosh, everybody listen to Jerry's advice. Jerry Torres, it is a pleasure having you back on the Sara Carter Show. You're amazing. I can't wait to get you back on. We're going to be talking about fentanyl and whatever new trips you're taking, which I hope one day include me, because I would love to get out there with you on the front lines. Thank you again for being a part of the show. It's wonderful.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I think you understand now when you listen to the show and you hear the guests that I bring on the Sara Carter Show, that they give a level of depth that, I mean, I didn't even understand about particular stories. These are places that I travel to. These are people that I speak to. These are stories that I have been covering for more than a decade, maybe somewhere near 2 decades. But I listen to Jerry and I say to myself, wow, these are areas that I need to look into now, because it's always a process of learning, guys, right? You never know everything. And if someone tells you they do know everything about something, they are lying to you. That is a fact. Look, I'm going to bring Jerry back on. I plan on taking some of these trips with Jerry. I think he's fantastic. I think that the exposure that he's giving to what is happening right now is relevant to what we are facing as a nation and our own national security. And I know that you appreciate everything he had to tell us. Thanks again, Jerry, bringing you back on the show. I know why our founding fathers wanted America's currency backed by gold and silver. I think it's because we see what's happening in our country right now, right? But after receiving my genuine gold and silver products from Universal Coin and Bullion, I actually realized the importance of having something tangible that I can actually hold in my hand. UCB's president, Mike Fulgens, is a leader in the precious metals industry, and he was honored by his peers as the 2021 Dealer of the Year. He even showed me how gold has risen over 500% in the past 21 years, while the Dow and S&P indexes have only increased about 200%. Think about that. I trust UCB, and you should too. That's why I will get more gold and silver from Universal Coin and Bullion. Give them a call at 1-800-UCB-GOLD. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD, and tell them Sara sent you. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up, but not before I tell you about this crazy flight I had back from Arizona to Texas, because it was just a fascinating flight to me. First, I met the coolest flight attendant, and she was just saying how terrible she felt whenever she had to tell people about the whole mask thing. And, she just felt like it was so over exaggerated, especially now with everybody getting vaccinated, and she didn't even understand why. It's crazy. It's just crazy. Believe me, when you get on a plane, you think all of the flight attendants are the same. No, there are flight attendants out there that really are questioning the kind of insanity that the federal government mandates have been placed on them, right? So I met this really cool flight attendant. We were talking about the mask issue, got our masks on. Everybody's just sitting. I'm sitting way back of the plane. And all of a sudden, after we land, I could kind of smell something, but my mask, kind of muffled the smell. And I thought, well, maybe it's because I was so close to the toilet. Nah, I didn't see anyone go in there. So that wasn't it. It happened to be someone sitting a few rows ahead of me. And they had basically thrown up into their mask, and then they threw up into, of course, the bag. They used the bag because we had really bumpy flight. And then they were holding their bag out over the aisle. So like everybody's like, oh, whoa, because at first we didn't know what was going on. When the bag was being held over the aisle, it was dripping from a corner of the bag. Literally drip. I was like really close to me, right? Really close, like dripping. And I was like, is that really what I think it is? And she's like, look, I ralphed. Can somebody get me another bag? And I was like, oh my God, somebody please get her another bag, just throw a bag at her. But listen, this brings up the point that we could all try to be as clean as possible. We could be washing our hands, scrubbing our faces, wearing gloves, putting on masks, helmets, maybe a bubble suit would be the only thing, I think. Maybe an oxygen bubble suit, whatever that is. But we live in a world where we got to live with it. We got to live with, people throwing up bacteria. We got to live with viruses, things that we don't really even see. They're crawling all over the place. It's just the way things are, guys. It's just who we are. We're organic, I don't know. I want to say a machine, but we're organic. We're human. And we shouldn't be freaking out about it. We have an amazing body, a body that learns to adjust to changes. It's not perfect. Things do happen, right? People get sick. People I loved have become sick. One almost died from COVID. Thank God he didn't. That's Gary Brugman, and God bless him, that he's doing great, and I talk to him every day. But we have to take a step back and, just look at the reality of things. We can't become victims of our own fear. And we just really can't do that, because once we cross those lines, we cross all lines. Fear is detrimental to us. Fear makes us do things that we would not normally do. It's okay to have a little bit of fear. That makes us cautious. It's not okay to be so afraid that we become a problem to everybody else. It's not okay to be so afraid that we don't live our lives anymore. That's not okay. We are human. And what makes us special is that we're willing to do things even though we know there could be an inevitable end, and even though we know there will be someday. We take risks. We go to space. We fly jets. We, travel the world. We visit villages. We help a person that's sick at the border, and we don't even think about ourselves. We're trying to save them. We're not worried about putting on a glove and sticking a mask on our face if we don't have one. If we need to help someone, we're there for them. That's what makes being a human being special and wonderful and makes us different than the rest of the animal kingdom, right? That's what makes us closer to God. Anyways, thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. Remember, this is where the story begins. You're a part of this family. I'm a part of your family. We're part of this great American family. Folks, go to saracarter.com to get the latest and the greatest on stories. That's saracarter.com. And while you're there, please sign up for my email list. And don't forget to download this podcast. Download the podcast. Give your reviews, whether that's Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. I read them all. Thank you again. God bless you, and God bless our great nation. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Weber, the CEO of the Association for Mature American Citizens. It's also known as AMAC. The most important question, I think, for so many people out there is, how much does AMAC membership cost? What does it cost the regular consumer?
Yeah, so for $16 a year, okay, or less, you can join at a 1, 3, or 5-year membership. You get a couple of things. You get the benefits. You get a great subscription to a magazine. So for $16, you're going to receive a bi-monthly magazine. But your voice is now going to be heard in Washington. We take our marching orders from you. If you stand for faith, family, freedom, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the greatness of America, if you believe in individual freedoms and everything you just said, Sara, $16 is not a lot of money to join the 2.3 million members that are really fighting hard to ensure that America remains the best country in the world.
Rebecca, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm honored to have you and AMAC as a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. For more information, folks, visit amac.us/Carter.